Sheer Force is one of the best abilities of all time, and I'm going to show you how to really make the most of it. Sheer Force is easily one of the best Pokemon abilities of all time, but it's also one of the more complicated ones and requires quite a bit of game knowledge to really pull it off. But before all of that, we're going to watch this Pokemon battle to show you exactly how powerful Sheer Force is, and then we'll get into all of the details of how to use it, how to combine it with things, and how to really make the most of Sheer Force as an ability. Okay, so what we have here is a team that is gonna let this Feraligatr do its job. Okay, so what we've got some hazards here because we want to get rid of any kind of focus sashes, that sort of thing, any sturdies. We've got some Pokemon that can pivot, and Polion Toxapex can let us get into the right sort of position. We've got Venomoth that can, take out some things that Feraligatr might struggle with. We've got options here. Everything here is designed to be able to position Feraligatr in and let it get its job done. We need to ideally get a Dragon Dance off. Maybe we don't need it, might be overkill, but that's the idea here with this team. So they lead out with a Tinkerton, which is pretty solid. We're going to go just straight into Kleavor here now. Tinkerton is a bad matchup for Kleavor, so we're gonna U-turn out, get some chip damage, and obviously with that Choice Scarf we're going to be quicker. Kleavor not the fastest Pokemon, but we get that job done there, and pivot into something a little bit more well suited. Toxapex and Polion are both good switch-ins here. Just means that if it comes through with a Gigaton Hammer or anything like that, we'll be able to survive that and get ourselves in a better position. So there you go, Gigaton Hammer resisted, not a problem. Yeah. So we've exposed the leftovers there on that, and we also have our own leftovers. So at the moment, Tinkerton isn't really in the greatest position here. Empoleon is another Pokemon that can also get up some hazards as well. So we're going to go and get those Stealth Rocks up, which is a very important part of this. It means that if we are able to one-shot everything, nothing's going to hang on with Sturdy or a Focus Sash. So that's what we want there. And they've gone for a Thunder Wave there on Empoleon. Empoleon has done its job at this point. This Empoleon is here just to frustrate things. We've got the Roar to kind of phase things out. We've got Boost to heal up and Surf just to get some pretty much neutral damage on most things. So there's a knockoff. They're trying to get rid of leftovers, which again is fine because we still have healing with Roost. But yeah, we get that out of there now, and that is pretty comfortable. In comes the Annihilate. Now we've got to be careful with this. We don't want to just be hitting it for no reason, because then we can build up that Rage Fist, and that is a problem. It does also, of course, just have standard fighting moves, which Empoleon doesn't really want to deal with. So we're probably going to pivot elsewhere here. We could pivot into Grimstar, be neutral to fighting moves. We could go into Toxapex, Venomoth. Either way, we've got Pokemon that mean we're not going to take too much damage here. Toxapex is the better switch here. Again, another great pivot where I can just say, I can put you in an awkward position again and not really struggle, and they go for the low sweep there. Interesting. Drops the speed, but neither Toxapex nor Empoleon are particularly quick, so it's not that much of an issue. The reason I'm going to Toxapex here is because I can use Toxic to do some residual damage over time, but not trigger that Rage Fist. Of course, Rage Fist gets more powerful the more times you do attack damage to a Pokemon, and we're not doing attack damage, we're just clicking Toxic and letting that whittle away at this Annihilate, which would be a very, very scary Pokemon, but we're just not going to give him what he wants, which is the ability to stack that Rage Fist. That's going to stay weak, switches out, and we Baneful Bunker on nothing, so it's going to fail, and we're free to go again. Now, those Stealth Rocks are starting to do their job. Salazzle being Fire type, of course, taking a fair bit of damage from that on the entry. if it was focus sashed. It's not useful anymore. Now we could stay in but here, but there's opportunities for other switches. Empoleon is potentially a good one. Grimmsnarl could be a decent opportunity to get some screens up at this point. But we'll go with Empoleon here. It's going to be neutral damage, regardless. So if they go for that fire move, it's going to be neutral. If they go for the poison, it's not going to do anything. It'll be interesting to see what they go for. And they go for the nasty plot here. So nasty plot, of course, raising that special attack by 2 stages, effectively doubling it. But we could just click Raw and force it out here. We could go for Surf, but Raw is just a nice way to just get it out. So they're going to Terrastallize here. What do they think we've got? They think we're maybe going to go for Surf or something, so they've gone into Dragon. That's a smart one. They're going to Dragon to resist the incoming water move. So they've gone for Incinerate here, which we're going to take that neutrally, and Empoleon's bulky enough. We get that back out of there. They're going to come back in to take more Stealth Rock damage. It won't be as devastating now that they're no longer a fire type, but regardless, that is good. So now, Great Tusk is potentially a problem because it is probably the best rapid spinner in the game, and we don't really want that. Now we could attack this. This is something that we can attack pretty freely. I'm expecting the fighting move, so I'm going to Terrastallize into Fairy here. Roost. If I survive the hit, which I probably will, then yeah, Roost lets me get back into a good, healthy position. So if they go for the close combat, which would kill, it won't kill anymore. Oh, and they just get some rocks up of their own. Okay, fair enough. Maybe they thought we'd switch out Fear in the fighting move, which is a fair prediction. Either way, they get the rocks up for free. So what is the plan now? I think, yeah, we just click Surf. If they stay in, they take some serious damage. And if they switch out, we hit something for free. It's probably going to be a Salazzle that comes in. Oh no, it's the Tinkerton. Okay. So Tinkerton's going to take a tiny bit of stealth up damage, not much. And we get some decent chip damage there with that Surf there. That's a decent chunk. Without leftovers, that would have been a 3 hit. I think leftovers might make it into a 4, but we're not here to use Empoleon to do the damage. So again, we're just positioning ourselves between Empoleon and Toxapex until the right situation arises where we can maybe get some screens up, maybe get Feraligatr into play. So they go for the knockoff there, which is fine. We lose that Black Sludge, but this Toxapex is the Regenerator set, so it can just heal by going out and coming back in again. It's going to be ridiculously frustrating for them either way. Now, do they switch out here? If they switch, I can probably try and predict with a Toxic. Obviously, Toxic will do nothing to this. Oh, and they do stay in. Okay, so I'm gonna look crazy here. I'm gonna look silly, but it was trying to predict a switch and Toxicing something else. But yeah, obviously, Toxic doesn't work against Steel types. Okay, so what is the play going to be here? I mean, realistically, it can't hurt me too much. So yeah, so they've gone for the knockoff again. That's doing tiny amounts of damage. I don't have an item anymore. Paralysis has stopped me moving though. Okay. Again, this isn't really a problem here. This is just to pivot in and stop momentum, the same as Empoleon is. So again, they're just going to keep doing that. Oh my god, the paralysis is really starting to cause a bit of a problem here. If I can't recover, that might be a little bit annoying for me if I can't get that recovery off. But let's see. So they go for another knockoff. They're not getting any critical hits or anything, not that it would kill. But there we go, recover now lands. And there we go, just back into a really good position where they can't really do too much to me. Now, this Tinkerton isn't actually a problem here. I can't poison it, but I know that when Feraligatr does come in, Feraligatr can get the job done. You know? So Tinkerton isn't something that Feraligatr is going to struggle against. That is okay. So I need to find a way to position in here. Grimmsnarl isn't going to be good against a Gigaton Hammer, but it doesn't seem like they're going for it at the moment. I don't know what the play is here. So, yeah, let's get into Venomoth just to have some pivot. Oh, and they switch as well. Okay, so the switch was free there. I could have gone into Feraligatr and just hit that Dragon Dance turn 1. Okay, so they go into the Munkidori. Probably my favorite out of the quote-unquote loyal 3. I've got a fun set that I've done with Munkidori. It's very irritating for people, but it's a lot of fun for me. So, Quiver Dance could be a play here, just start setting up. Or I could take that poison ability away from them with Skill Swap. Give them Tinted Lens, which would make them able to do neutral damage to pretty much anything. But their Toxic Chain ability is a problem. So they get rid of Venomoth, and that's fine. But we managed to hamstring this thing. Okay, so Feraligatr can switch in here. We don't get any screens up in front of it with Grimmsnarl, but I think this is a situation where Feraligatr can quite comfortably set up at least one Dragon Dance. I thought Munkidori would have been faster, but there we go. Maybe no speed investment on it. Maybe that's why. Feraligatr does have that speed investment on this. But there we go. We get that crunch. And there is that big one-hit damage. Now, Munkidori is probably not the best example here. Munkidori would have gone down to a crunch regardless. But let's see some of the focus. So remember, we've got the Sheer Force boost. We've got the Life Orb boost, but not taking in Life Orb recoil. And we've got a Dragon Dance as well. So that's 3 sets of attack boosts of varying intensities. But let's just say this Feraligatr is a lot stronger than it should be. And there we go, there's the one hit on the Tinkerton. So now we're starting to see how Sheer Force is doing bits. Now, of course, for Sheer Force to work, you need to have an attack with a secondary effect. And that's what all of these attacking moves have. So Waterfall, again, just completely clean through Electivire. Electivire is a bulky Pokemon. Electivire can take some hits, but not today. Electivire had to hold that one. Definitely wouldn't have enjoyed that. So now, who are they going to send out here? Because Feraligatr can now go on a tear. It's now very quick and very strong. So they're seeing these water moves, and they've gone into the Dragon. Okay, but what they don't know is, oh, I've got Ice Punch as well. And Ice Punch works the same way. Because it has a secondary chance, it's got a chance to freeze. But we're getting rid of that chance to freeze and make sure you got a 100% chance to take these hands and enter the Shadow Realm. There we go. So that Salazzle is gone. What else have they got left? What else have they got left here? So Albert comes out, and that is the Annihilate. Now, of course, we need to one-hit this because we don't want to be charging up that Rage Fist there. Now, Waterfall is our strongest move, of course. If it's neutral, we'll go for Waterfall. And there we go. That Annihilate, another bulky Pokemon, just absolutely erased here by this Sheer Force Feraligatr. And Great Tusk again. Some decent bulk here. But that super effective Waterfall, yeah, it's off the charts. Absolutely off the charts. And there we go. Feraligatr just comes in and sweeps up and cleans up. Okay, so you've seen how good Sheer Force is. However, the key to making the most of Sheer Force is understanding how Pokemon moves work, how they're categorized, and how their effects are coded. So on this board, we've got a list of moves, and I'm going to show you with some examples how you would and wouldn't be able to make shear force work. But first, what is shear force?
Shear force raises the base power of all damaging moves that have any additional effects by approximately 30%, but their additional effects are ignored.
So shear force is a Pokemon ability that makes moves stronger by cutting out their secondary effects. Sounds simple enough. It's important to also know that if a Pokemon move doesn't have a secondary effect, then it also doesn't get the sheer force boost. So you don't just get the boost with no drawback, it is balanced against giving you the extra side effects. So those of you watching at this point are going to be split into two groups, either wondering what is a secondary effect, or some of you thinking you know what a secondary effect is and maybe not being completely right. Let's see which one you fall under. A Pokemon move's effects can go into two categories, the primary effect and the secondary effect. So primary effects, very simply, are things that happen every time the move works. Okay, so some moves aren't 100% accurate, but every time that move passes that accuracy effect and works, this effect will happen. So, for example, a simple attacking move like Tackle, its primary effect is to cause damage, and that's it. Has no secondary effect, there's nothing else that happens there. That's all Tackle does. You can also get status moves. A simple status move like Toxic, category status. When it works, it's not always 100% accurate unless it's used by a poison Pokemon, which is pretty much always the case now. But as long as Toxic hits, it will poison the opponent. That is its primary effect. That's what it's here to do. A secondary effect, however, runs on a different set of checks after the move has worked. For example, we've got a move like Spiky Shield. It's a status move. Its basic thing to do is to protect. It stops you from taking damage. That's its basic thing. If it works, it will stop you from taking damage. Its secondary effect, however, checks to see if you've been attempted to be hit by a contact move. If that happens, then it will do damage to the opponent. That is a secondary effect. It's not always going to do that, but it just might. Now, this isn't to be confused with moves with more than one primary effect. A good example of that is Torch Song. Torch Song is an attack, and every time it works, it does damage and it boosts the user's special attack stat by one stage. This happens every time Torch Song works. Most people think of stat boosts as secondary effects because in some cases, and in a lot of cases, they are. But in cases of moves like Torch Song, that is the primary effect. That is what the move is designed to do all the time. Compare that to a move like Ancient Power, which is also an attack that does damage, but its boost is a secondary effect because it doesn't always proc every single time you use the move. Ancient Power can work perfectly fine and just do damage, but there is a small probability chance that after doing that damage, it will also boost all of the user's stats. That makes it a secondary effect. And there are plenty of other moves like this. So moves like Flamethrower, which will do damage and then have a chance to burn. Or moves like Dire Claw, which is an attack that does damage and then runs a different probability check to see if it's going to afflict a status, and then does a different probability check to decide which of those statuses it's going to ruin your life with. Burn, paralysis, or sleep. Crazily broken move, by the way. And that's how it works. That is a secondary effect. And just in the way that there are moves with multiple secondary effects, you can also have moves with multiple primary effects and a secondary effect. A great example of that is Flare Blitz. It's an attack, it does damage, and it does recoil to the user, but it also has a 10% chance to burn the opponent. Secondary effect, because it's on a different probability check than the basic primary effect. So at this point, you're probably thinking, oh, I get it. How does this factor into sheer force? The most famous example of this is Earth Power and Earthquake. Two fairly similar moves, both the same type, both learned predominantly by the same Pokemon, and it's the reason that Nidoking will use its special attack stat rather than its physical attack stat, because it has the sheer force ability. Earth Power is a slightly weaker attacking move that primarily does damage but also has a chance to debuff, whereas Earthquake is the more powerful move, which uses Nidoking's more powerful attack stat but doesn't have a secondary effect. It just does raw damage. And that means that by the calculations, Earth Power actually ends up doing more damage under sheer force than Earthquake would, which means that just by removing a debuff, which isn't really that useful with Earth Power, you then have a much more powerful attack than you would with Earthquake. And there are many, many more moves that utilize this and make sheer force an incredibly damaging ability. But that's not even the best bit. The Life Orb held item is the real reason that sheer force is as powerful as it is. Life Orb is a held item that trades power for self-inflicted damage. It boosts the power of damaging moves and gives recoil damage to the user of those moves. So it's risk and reward, basically. So we saw this Feraligatr doing all this big damage and never took any recoil. There was no Life Orb in play. What are you on about? Well, that's where you're wrong. So Life Orb as an item is coded in a weird way, but it plays really well with this line of thinking for how moves are used. So Life Orb as an item is triggered every time a Pokemon move is successfully used. And every time a Pokemon move is used, regardless of what move it is, it will boost the damage output of that move by a fixed percentage. Now, if the damage of that move is 0, 30% of 0 is still 0, but that boost is still happening. So believe it or not, Life Orb is actually triggering when you click Protect. Life Orb is triggering when you click Dragon Dance. There's just nothing for it to multiply, but it's still triggering, and that is its primary effect. However, its secondary effect is the recoil. The recoil only triggers if the selected move is a damage dealing move. And because there's a separate set of criteria, that makes it a secondary effect. Now this is going to start to click for some of you now as to why this works so well. Sheer Force at its base does two things: boosts damage and nullifies secondary effects. Life Orb Recoil is a secondary effect, but there's a very specific relationship there that makes it quite dangerous to get wrong. Sheer Force only triggers when you select an attacking move with a secondary effect. That means that the trigger is always the move, not the Life Orb. That means that Life Orb isn't the driver, it's just along for the ride. So if you were to use a Sheer Force Pokemon and use Earthquake on them to try and get the Life Orb boost as well, you wouldn't get the Sheer Force boost, you would still get the Life Orb boost, but you'd also take the recoil damage because Sheer Force hasn't been activated. Earthquake doesn't have a secondary effect, so Sheer Force doesn't even turn on. But when it does turn on, mad tip. So that is why Sheer Force is such a good ability, and in my opinion, probably the best attacking ability there is. If you found this video useful, let me know with a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments if there's anything you feel like I got wrong or maybe miscalculated on. And if you want to see more videos like this, hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to make sure you're going to see me in your feed with more educational Pokemon content, making you a better battler. I've been Professor Ash. You're awesome. Take care. Peace. And if you want to see an even deeper breakdown of this Sheer Force Life Orb combo, head over to the Patreon. Click the link on screen or the link in the description box below the video.